So what exactly is the plant animal interaction? So if we want to start, of course, everybody's life, every species life, I will say, is usually influenced by biotic as well as abiotic factors. So when it comes to abiotic factors, of course, there are many factors associated with it, and that includes soil, water, light, temperature, humidity, etc. So if at all you want to consider even distribution of the plants, you can see some plants they're restricted only to black cotton soil, some plants they're restricted only to lateritic soil, western Konkan region, something like that. And on the background of water also, if you see, we get a distribution of many species. Not only that, I will say, even the effect, the species richness, abundance, and the productivity of every species, that is again related to all these factors. So if at all plenty of water is available, of course you are going to get the dense populations. If water scarcity is there, then the populations of plants as well as the animals, that will be very, I will say, dispersed. So abundance, richness, productivity, everything is related to these abiotic factors. And not only this, these individual species, of course, when the ecosystem is affecting the species at the same time, individual species, individuals of these species, they are also going to play some kind of role in the ecosystem. And not only that, even when these ecosystem is going to affect, I will say, or affect the species at any level, it also going to affect the size of the populations. For example, I have quoted two examples, ants and bees, and queen is the major example in there. So any, I will say, queen of a beehive or even the ant mound, that has ability to produce almost 2,000 to 5,000. I'm quoting just example, 2,000 to 5,000 eggs per day. That is depending on the availability of the resources. But when in the time of drought, in the time of scarcity, the same queen is not at all going to lay even a single egg. So that is, of course, that is going to these availability of the resources, that is going to affect the even the size of the population. And not only that, even the sex is going to change in case of, if you consider temperature itself. And there are certain examples from reptile, there are certain examples from the plants. They are known to have change or alteration of the sex. Now I have quoted two examples again, reptiles and cannabis. So whenever there is higher temperature, usually whenever these reptiles they lay eggs below the soil, usually the upper and the lowermost eggs they hatch out as a male, and the middle layer of these eggs that usually hatch out as a female. So that is, I will say, decided only by the, I will say, the temperature. Same is the case with cannabis. Cannabis is popularly known as hemp, ganja in Marathi, bhang, ganja in Marathi. So this plant is also known to change its sex from male to female or female to male. That is depending on say the temperature. And in short, then we can say that we are not alone. Human beings are, they are not alone. And for last almost, I will say, 1.5 year, we are suffering with a very, I will say, smaller organism. Even we can't see with the help of our day-to-day microscopes too. And that has proved that we are not alone, and we are going to ruled by, I will say, these microbes only. So, in short, if at all we are going to define what exactly is the interaction, then it is a relation between the species that live together in a community, and that is nothing but the interaction. Now, when it comes to interaction, there are two basic types. One is direct interaction and another is indirect interaction. So, direct interaction, it can be considered as the effect or the impact of one individual on the another. And of course it is not at all going to mediated by, say, any or transmitted through any of the agent. Third individual, third party is not at all there. But when it comes to indirect interaction, of course, one species, the presence of one species that can harm the another species, and the effect in this communication, in this interaction, is not a direct, it is indirect. And that's why there is one saying in Marathi, leki bole sune lage. So mother-in-law usually, I will say, scolds the daughter but that is not directly to the daughter. It is intended towards the daughter-in-law. In same fashion, this indirect interaction is there. And here I would like to quote example of dissection of frog in the curricula. So probably the younger generation who is now attending this class, I will say, probably they don't know whatever they have seen the dissection, that is in only in virtual form. Uh, I will say only some, what we can say, animations probably they must have shown to them. But if you ask the teachers of my generation particularly, we have dissected so many frogs in 11th and 12th science, and that too, one for respiratory system, one for regular circulatory system, another for nervous system, third, fourth for something like that we have dissected. And if we quote examples of the mega cities like Pune and Mumbai, especially Mumbai, and that's why it was banned throughout, say, entire curricula. So people used to collect the frogs, especially Rana tigerina, from paddy fields in and around Mumbai city as well as in Pune city. And every college was utilizing then thousands of frog for the purpose of dissection. And one day they found that the scientists, they found that the populations of the frog that is dwindling, that is going down, and because of this, the pests are increasing like anything. And then it was decided that we will not use frog anymore for the purpose of dissection. If at all we are going to use, it is only as a model. So only one frog is dissected, and the rest of the students, they usually observe, like observe how to dissect it and everything, and it is usually studied. So this is a kind of interaction we can say. So if you see in this indirect interaction, that is that was interaction only between human beings and the frogs. But the third species, that is insect pests, they increase like anything. So that is that we can correlate as indirect interaction. So when it comes to direct interaction, usually they are divided into three basic types: for positive interaction, negative interaction, and neutral interaction. Of course, usually we get positive interactions, negative interactions example for this, but there are hardly, I will say, any example in neutral interaction, because whenever we say that is neutral interaction, it is usually not like that. And how it is there, that we are going to discuss. So in positive interaction, one of the individuals is usually getting benefited, at least one I will say, and another individual, either it is getting benefited, or it is getting, I will say, uh, it becomes neutral. So there is neither harm to another species, or if at all it is there, it will be only positive benefit to that. So that comes under positive interaction. Then negative interaction, one species is sure shot getting harmed by the other species. And third interaction, usually it is said that it is neither has direct nor damage or benefit from the interaction, but it is not there. And usually here we quote example of, say, the epiphytes, example of lichens, etc. But if at all we are going to see, if at all we are going to study these kind of relations at a deeper level, then we will find that there is a little bit damage to the another species. And most of the times these neutral interactions, they have proved that these interactions, they have proved that they are on the, I will say, negative side rather than the positive side. Because when we say epiphytes, they usually roost on some host plants, branches of the host plant, for some or the other purposes. But at the same time, we have seen that orchids, they are usually they have interaction with mycorrhiza, fungi. And when fungi comes there, they usually feed on dead material or decaying material. So if at all they grow on the branches of living trees, they secrete some kind of chemicals on these branches. So some kind of damage, some amount of damage is always there, and that's why we can't say that they are neutral interactions, but they tend more towards the negative interactions. Now, when it comes to indirect interactions, of course, it is a sequential process that doesn't happen over the, I will say, over the night. In single instance, we can't see that, but it usually happens with, say, sequence of the processes. So there are different processes associated with it, and that's why it is difficult to detect immediately. So on the long term, you can say you can detect it, but in shorter span, we cannot say exactly it must happen like this. And this usually these chain of say sequence or the sequential processes, they are usually considered as a chain of extinctions. Now, there here in the chain of extinction, we can quote example of course, I'm going to show the same example in the later slide also. But if at all you lose one banyan tree, Ficus bengalensis or Ficus racemosa from your own region, probably you are going to lose more than 20 different species of birds that are visiting to that area. So in turn, some of the species probably they must have eaten by these birds. These birds, they are not at all coming only for the purpose to feed on the figs that we eat, but even they come for the purpose of roasting, even they come for the purpose of nesting. And if at all they are living there, probably insects will not turn to that area because the birds are there. But if you're going to lose this tree, banyan tree or the Ficus racemosa tree, these birds, they are not at all going to visit that place, and that's why you are going to see any other effect that is coming out of this, I will say, interaction. So this is a kind of internal interaction, I will say, negative, indirect interaction. Now in this talk, I'm going to cover 6 different aspects. One is pollination, another is fruit or seed dispersal, nesting, roasting, crying for help, co-evolution, and crazy courtship. So when it comes to pollination, of course, we know that transfer of pollen grain from anther of one flower to the stigma of same flower or another flower. So when it is from it is on the same flower, then usually we say it is a self pollination. When it is for another flower, usually we call it as cross pollination. But when it, of course, basically there are two types that we know. One is wind pollination, and another is uh, usually by animals. And of course, third type is there, but it is very little studied type, and that is water pollination. So when it comes to the exploitation of animals, exploitation, I'm saying it is underlined word, that is exploitation of the animals for the purpose of pollination. So it is always on intentional on the side of the plant, and it is always accidental on the side of the animal. So plant's intention is to have pollination through, I will say, media. Media is insect. But when insect visits that flower, it is not at all for the purpose of pollination. He visits that flower, or that animal visits that flower for the purpose either for the food or for the foraging that pollen grain, something like that. And that's why it is always intentional on the side of the plant, and it is always accidental on the side of the animal. Now, there are different types of pollinators available. Then, what exactly is the pollinator, that I'm not going to discuss it. But there are different types of pollinations that we know: bat pollination, mollusk pollination, insect pollination, etc. And based on this, there are different types of flowers too. So these flowers, they are characterized for specialized kind of pollination. Some flowers, they are say generalized flowers, some flower they are specialized flowers. For example, nowadays if you have seen, Bombax mulbaricum is in the flower, Shalmali or sour in Marathi usually we call, it is in the flower, and it is visited by variety of pollinators, variety of visitors, that starts from ant and it ends into a bigger, I will say, animal like a crow. It ends into bigger animal like a crow. Even sometimes giant squirrels also visit that. So these flowers, they are usually considered as generalized flowers. But there are certain flowers that are usually pollinated only by specific pollinators, and these flowers, they are considered as specialized flowers. Now, based on daytime or night time, again these pollinators, again these flowers also have a very specific characteristics in them. So usually day flowers, they are colored flowers. Usually the day flowers, they are colored flowers, and night flowers, they are majority times, I will say, they are only white colored flowers. So in day colored flower, in the day flower particularly, you will get blue, violet, pink, yellow, or in any shade of these, I will say, colors. But when it comes to night, usually these flowers, they are, we can't say it is colorless, but they are usually white colored flowers. And for this I will say example is Brahma Kamal, that is a cactus. Then another, there are many cacti, they usually bloom in the night time. Then there is very specialized plants like Dreamy arazi. Usually they bloom in the night time. So these flowers, they are very specific. And when it comes to, I will say, invitation for the purpose of pollination, because pollinators, they don't come at its own. In the beginning only we have discussed this, that it is always intentional on the side of the plant, and it is always accidental on the side of the animals. So when it comes to, I will say, plant, they usually produce different kind of, say, colors, and these colors, they are usually considered as visual cues. They are usually considered as visual cues. So usually the red colored flowers, they are pollinated by the birds. Usually they are pollinated by the birds. And when it comes to blue or yellow colored flowers, they are usually pollinated by the insects. Large groups of the insects, they pollinate usually these flowers. Then there is another cue usually used by, say, these uh, plants, and it is a chemical cue. It is a chemical cue. So for this purpose, to attract the pollinators, they usually secrete some kind of chemicals, and usually these secretions, we call it as a nectar. Usually we call it as nectar. And when this nectar is evaporated, that gives, I will say, gives out as some kind of smell, some kind of odor, or we can even call it as a fragrance. So if at all we are going to see these three different categories: smell, odor, and fragrance. So these are going to attract a different, I will say, group of the insects. So when it comes to the fragrance, now usually the jasmine flowers, parijatak, they are usually, I will say, the fragrant flowers. The fragrance is good fragrance in our sense. So it is not all the time all the smells, they are bad smells. Some smells, they are good smell in our sense, I will say. So probably the decaying smell, rotting smell, it is not pleasant for us, but it may be pleasant for the other animal. So when it comes to the chemical cue, usually they secrete some kind of nectar. When it is evaporated, it gives rise to some kind of, I will say, smell. When it is a fragrance, usually the fragrance attracts human beings first, second, some kind of beetles, and third, some kind of moths. So if you see majority of these fragrant flowers particularly, they are night pollinated flowers, white flowers. If you see the jasmine, mogra, jai, jui, kunda, all they are white colored flowers, and they are usually bloom during night time. So of course, whenever we harvest in the morning time, and that's why we can't say, I will say, we can't have its nectar at its fullest. Then if at all you are going to visit, you are attracted, these pollinators, they're attracted towards this flower for the purpose, I will say, by using, I will say, either visual cue or chemical cue. It must have something to eat it, or in I will say, in the terms of some kind of reward. So reward is usually provided by these flowers in 2 or 3 different, I will say, sets. So one set is food, and that is in the form of either entire flower can be eaten by these pollinators. So when the entire flower is eaten by these pollinators, of course, that plant has to produce so many flowers. So some of the flowers, they're eaten by these animals, and some of the flowers, they get pollinated. Then second type is, of course, a sucrose. Usually we call it as a nectar. Sucrose, or a form of glucose, we can say, in a broader sense. So it provides energy to that insect, and that's why they come for the purpose of that nectar. And third is pollen. So some of the insects, they are known to eat these pollens. So and that's why these pollinators, they are called as the pollen robbers, or the honey robber, something like that. And that's why when they are feeding on these pollens, of course, it is chitinous material, and it helps in, I will say, the building of the insect's own body, and that's why they feed on these kind of, say, pollen grains. Then on the based on certain categories, usually the flowers, they are categorized broadly into three different categories. Insects flowers. Insects flowers, whatever we have seen in the, we'll say, cues, usually they are blue colored flowers, pink colored flowers, yellow colored flowers. They are pollinated by the insects. And if at all you want to see, if any person is wearing blue colored dress, it attracts more mosquitoes. It attracts more mosquitoes. So mosquitoes, they get attract towards the blue shades of the shades of blue color, we can say. And then when it comes to the bird, usually the flowers are bigger flowers. And nowadays we are getting so many bird flowers in our vicinity. One is Pangara, Erythrina indica, Erythrina subrosa, then Bombyx mulbaricum. All these are red colored flowers, and they attract these birds to feed on the nectar of these flowers. And then the third category, we can say, it is bat flowers. Of course, they are very big flowers, huge flowers, like that of Brahmakamar, and they are pollinated by bats. They are usually night blooming flowers, because bats, they are active during night, and that's why they visit these flowers at night time. So it is that. So first example we are going to discuss is about, I will say, insect pollination, and this is Amorphophilus peonifolius, and the photograph is of course from my own botanic garden, I will say, when I was working with Shivaji University Kolhapur, and there this photograph has taken. So if you see this inflorescence, this is entirely a racemose type of, basically racemose type of inflorescence, elongated peduncle you get, and this entire peduncle is covered with only one, I will say, involucral bracts. Usually we call it as a spathe, and the inflorescence is called as a spadix. So if you see the basal part of this inflorescence with dark colored structures inside, and only tip is having some different color. They are female flowers. Then upper side, middle part portion, I will say, these are only male flowers, and the terminal portion, it is something abnormal structure, sterile structure, and that's why usually it is called as sterile appendage. So whenever and if you see the internal structure of this spathe, on the upper side it is very smooth, but at the lower side it is very rough. So these rough structures are because of, say, some kind of nectary glands that are present there. They secrete some kind of chemicals which are very fitted to our, I will say, senses, which is not good smell for our senses, but it is attracting some different strata of animals. So beetles, usually they get attracted towards this, and when they come towards this, of course, they come along with the pollen grain visiting another flower, and then they pollinate these ovaries, these female flowers on the first hand. And once it is pollinated in the night time, usually of course, after pollination of these ovaries, after pollination of these female flowers, they are of no more use to these pollinators. So in the night time, usually the male flowers, they, I will say, dehisce. Male flowers, they mature and they dehisce the pollen grains. They liberate the pollen grains, and whatever pollinators they are crawling on the in the bottom of this spathe, they get overloaded with these pollens. And once these pollens, they are liberated from these anthers, then these walls, they become shrunk. And once this is transferred from smooth to rough, then they can crawl outside this spathe and they fly away to another flower of same species, and there the pollination is achieved. Now here there is one concept associated with this, and it is known as thermogenesis. Of course, in this example is also known for thermogenesis, and this example is also known for thermogenesis. And this is Ceropegia. Of course, my own school is known to, I will say, describe many species of Ceropegias from Kolhapur. Fortunately, H.S. Patil, I have seen H.S. Patil as one of the participants in the audience, and his colleagues have worked on the Ceropegias. Now, if you see, these are two different species. One is Ceropegia sahyadrica and another is Ceropegia noorjahani. And if you see the internal structure of this corolla tube, now this is the entire corolla tube for, I will say, SYBSA student and TYBSA student. I would like to say quote certain parts of the flower. Now, if you see at the base, Noorjahani particularly, and even Sahyadrika, you will find that there are sepals. Upper part is petal, and petal is forming a tube like that of Datura or any other gamopetalous flower. But the terminal part of this flower, they don't get separate from each. They're attached together, and that's why they create some kind of windows. They create some kind of slit, the doors, the windows, through which the pollinators, they can fly and enter this tube. Now if you see, the outer color is different and inner color is different. Now here, when the inner color is usually darker color, and here also you can see some kind of dark lines there. Lines are there, and these lines, they are usually called as the nectar guides. They are called as nectar guides, through which the insects goes down towards the gynostagium. And now here, if you see the basal portion of the corolla, it is usually swollen in structure, bulged structure, and it has say the hairs on it. So whoever is going to attract towards this, especially when it comes to Ceropegias, the dipteran flies, they pollinate these flowers. Now here, if you see in this window, you can see two basic, I will say, two individuals of dipteran flies. They usually go through this channel, and the interesting part associated with it is around this gynostagium, again the corolla tube is translucent. Corolla tube is translucent, so it allows the light to come inside, and that's why whoever enters inside, attracted towards the nectar which is secreted by the nectary glands present here at the base, that fellow feels that there is light on the other side of the tunnel. So it looks like that of tunnel, and usually these insects, they crawl down feeling that there is exit on this side, and they come here. So once they come here, these hairs, they allow these insects to come down, but they don't allow these insects to go out. And that's why the light is coming, moreover light is coming on this side, basal side. So they get attracted towards that light. They play towards, I will say, this gynostagium, and in that struggle, whatever the polinias, they are there, they get attached to these bodies of these dipteran flies. They pollinate these gynostagium, and once the fertilization is achieved, then these hairs, they fall down. The entire waxy surface present on the inner side, that becomes shrink, and then these dipteran flies, they fly away to another, in search of another flower, carrying the pollinia from this flower to another flower. And here the basic structure usually, or the translucent structures present at the, I will say, this bulge gynostagium, they are usually called as light windows. They are usually called as light windows. And here in previous example, it was also same. Here it is also same. So light windows, they imitate that there is an exit on that side, and that's why the insects, they come to that particular location. Of course, in the beginning slide, or in initial slide only, we have said it is always intentional on the side of the plant. It is always accidental on the side of the animals. Now there is one more concept that I forgot to mention, that is what exactly is the thermogenesis. Now if you see the internal structure, internal color, it is usually dark in, I will say, dark in color, and it has, I will say, at least 2 or 3 degrees temperature higher than the outside temperature. So it allows to evaporate the nectar secreted by the nectar is present at the base, and that allows, or that attracts that nectar, evaporated nectar, that goes out through these windows, and then it attracts the pollinator. So this kind of different pollination also we have seen in Ceropegia as well as Amorphophallus. Now there is one more case associated with parasitic plants. Usually parasitic plants, of course, these are 2 different varieties occurring in our region, Pune region particularly, we will say, Falcata falcata and Falcata variety Coccinea. Coccinea, it stands for red in color. So whenever we get a Coccinea epithet, that indicates it is red in color, and that's why we eat tondli. Tondli is again Coccinea indica. Coccinea means red. So These these flowers, they are usually pollinated by the birds. They are usually pollinated by the birds. Now, if at all the bird is not going to touch this, the tip of this, I will say, unopened bud, it is not going to open. So whenever it touches this, I will say, the tip of this flower, it, I will say, violently opens out, it explodes out, and in that explosion, whatever it is, elastic structure, elastic, I will say, movement, it is there. The pollen grains, they are liberated on the head of that particular bird, which is going to open these unopened buds. And when it is going to visit for the another flower for the purpose of, say, nectar, obviously that flower is going to get pollinated, and that happens usually in many parasitic plants. Now here I'm going to continue on the same, I will say, the parasitic plant. Now here in this image you can see two different species are there. On the left hand side, this is Dendrophthoe falcata, and on the right hand side, this is Viscum capitulatum. Dendrophthoe is a member of Lorantheaceae, and it is a parasite on many, I will say, angiosperm species like that of Syzygium cumini, Ficus racemosa, Mangifera indica, etc. And on this Dendrophthoe falcata, Viscum capitulatum is parasitic. Viscum capitulatum is parasitic. Now, if you ask any fungi fellow who is studying fungi, that fellow will say this is a super parasite, hyper parasite. But in angiosperms, such kind of parasitism is called as epiparasitism. These are called as epiparasites. These are called as epiparasites. So Dendrophthoe falcata is parasite on some angiosperm host, and Viscum is parasite on this Dendrophthoe falcata. So in Marathi we have a saying. Of course, now how many of we use these Marathi sayings we don't know, but the generation, my generation, I will say particularly, we have utilized so many Marathi sayings, and usually it is called as chora or more. So this can be applicable to this Viscum. This is a parasite on Dendrophthoe falcata. Now continuing with, I will say, these two examples, Viscum capitulatum as well as Dendrophthoe falcata. Both they set the seeds at the same time. Both these plants, they set the seeds at the same time, fruits at the same time. And this is the bird who feeds on these fruits. So these fruits, they are dispersed by the birds. And now there is one more mechanism associated with these dispersal, I will say. If at all the seed or the fruit is eaten by any bird, it passes through the gizzard which is available in the gut of this bird. So it crushes out. It crushes out whatever it is eating, whatever the bird is eating. Interestingly, the seeds of Dendrophthoe, seeds of say Dendrophthoe as well as Viscum, they are covered with some gelatinous material, mucilaginous material. They are covered with some mucilaginous material. So all the seeds they are not at all getting digested by these birds. So some of the seeds or majority of the seeds of these Dendrophthoe as well as Viscum, they come out of the gut of, I will say, this bird as it is. But very interestingly, before coming out of the gut, they are half germinated. These seeds, they are almost germinated. And whatever gelatinous or mucilaginous structure which is available with that seed, along with that, it stucks on the branches where this bird is going to defecate these seeds. So not only that, sometimes it happens that before they coming out of the gut of the, I will say, the bird, they're already germinated, they get attached to the branch, and that the haustoria is already developed. So because of the mucilaginous structure, they're getting, initially they get attached to this, and if at all they find a suitable host, then they penetrate the bark of this host, they establish the haustoria, and then they get established. Interestingly, now here if you see, this seed is of Dendrophthoe falcata, and these are the seeds of Viscum capitulatum. So both these seeds, they are eaten by the bird. They were eaten by the bird, and they're defecated at the same time. So in the beginning only, probably one of the seed of this viscum is going to establish on this Dendrophthis falcata before it establishes itself on the host of this plant. So this also can be seen. Sometimes you get the seeds of the same species, they get dropped on same individuals of the same species. So that can be called as autoparasitism. That is also can be seen here. Now in pollination, there is another concept known as a deceptive mechanism. Now, of course, both these plants we have seen very common in our region, particularly Saswad region. On the left hand side, this is called as Chitrak, Plumbago zelanica, and on the right hand side, this is a plant of tomato. This is a plant of tomato. Now, if you see the entire structure, entire stem of this tomato is full of, say, glandular pubescence. So whenever you touch, whenever you hold the stem of tomato, it is sticky in nature. And that stickiness is to avoid the pest that is going to attracted towards this plant. So whoever is the insect that comes in the contact with this plant, they get stuck in these, I will say, glandular hairs, and it dies because of the starvation. But at the same time, here also, if you see on the left hand side, this is the basal portion of this flower. This is unopened bud. This is open bud, and this is a pollinated flower, we can say. The basal part is calyx tube, and it is also covered with so many glandular hairs. So whoever is going to attract toward this, they will get attached to these glandular hairs, and it will die out of starvation. But at the same time, plant is expecting that somebody will come without touching its own body, plant's body, and in the air, it will pollinate these flowers. So obviously, who can fly in the air and who has long proboscis, they only can pollinate these flowers. So probably moths, they pollinate these flowers without touching the entire plant body. If at all they touch, they get attached, they will die out of starvation. But here, they will fly in the air, insert their proboscis down here in the tube, and drink out entire nectar available in the tube. And meanwhile, the anthers present on the mouth of this corolla, they will do their function. They will be liberated, and then they will be sent to another flower for the purpose of pollination. Now here, this is considered as a deceptive mechanism. On one side, it is attracting the pollinators for the purpose of pollination. At the other side, it is deterring the insects. They should not come and attack the plant for the purpose of foraging. So these two mechanisms at a time, they are played by or handled by the plants. Now when it comes to dispersal, particularly I will say seed or the fruit, majority times usually we say, even if you remember, Mama is there, Priya as well as Nikhil is there. If you remember, usually I used to say that the plants are more wiser than the animals. Now one can say I have this in this season particularly I have enjoyed, I will say two dozen of mangoes. That is 24 mangoes. I transported it from Devgad to Pune. But in that case, I will say the plant has given you a bribe of that pulp. And for that bribe, you have transported these seeds almost for 300 kilometers from Devgad to Pune. So plant is more successful. Of course, plant also knows that all the 24 seeds, they are going to germinate, they are going to establish. And that's why always seed setting is very high in every season by the plants. So at least a few of them, they will survive at Saswad, they will survive at Pune. So in that case, I will say they have utilized the human beings very wisely, very cleverly. And same thing happens with all the strata of the animals. Some insects, they are helpful in the dispersal of, I will say, especially the grass seeds. Some birds, they are helpful in the dispersal of say viscum, loranthus, then lantana camera, etc. And of course, bats, they are known for, I will say, the long term, long distance dispersal of some kind of seeds. And that's why, especially the robbers caves available at Mahabaleshwar, they are known for the different varieties of different species of the bats. At least 3 or 4 different species they inhabit that robbers caves. So it is said that the entire forest in and around Mahabaleshwar is maintained by these bats. So usually animals, they play major role in fruit as well as the seed dispersal. And in that, one more association, one more interaction, uh, in this I will say particular picture, you can see the internal tree is of jackfruit. Jackfruit is Artocarpus heterophyllus. And on the upper side or the outer side, we can see one more fig. And this fig is known as strangler fig. It is ficus, either Ficus calosa or any other species, Ciella, Tazakela, etc. So the birds, usually the birds as well as the bats, they feed on the figs of this particular, I will say, strangler fig. They come for the roosting purpose, they come for the sitting purpose, nesting purpose on jackfruit tree or any other tree. That is not necessary, it is not at all host specific. Any other tree, they come, and through the droppings led by these birds or the visitors, the seeds, they come out of the gut in the form of in the form of, or in the process of defecation. They fall down on the branches of this jackfruit or any other host plant, and slowly it germinates, it establishes itself, and it engulfs the entire tree. It engulfs the entire tree. It strangles the entire tree. And slowly, when jackfruit doesn't get any kind of space for further growth, it dies as it is. It dies as it is, and only the cover or strangler fig remains there. So here we can consider it is a tritrophic interaction, indirect interaction. So in the beginning, who was uh, who was involved in the interaction? Only jackfruit and, I will say, that bat or the bird. So that bat defecated everything whatever it has eaten on this jackfruit plant. Now jackfruit plant has played a role, that it has given a chance to sit on the plant, and unfortunately that chance has, I will say, paid a lot to particularly this jackfruit plant. So finally, this jackfruit plant will die, and only straggler fig will remain as it is. Now here we are going to see another concept, that is dispersive mutualism. So some of the birds, of course, hummingbird, we don't get any species of hummingbird in our region, but many species are there, and every species is restricted to, or it is specific to another species of plant. So in this, we would like to quote example of figs. Figs, they are known to have very specific pollinators. Wasps, they are particularly the pollinators. And here, if you see in the image, the hummingbirds, they pollinate these kind of flowers. At the same time, in our region also we have seen, especially the Santalum album, whenever it is in the fruit, red fruits are there, and these fruits, they are eaten by either red-vented bulbul or the quails. And then these quails, they eat on, and then they disperse to the another place. So it is that is called as dispersive mechanism. Then it comes to herbivory. Now herbivory, whenever it usually in our sense, herbivory, that includes only the cow, buffalo, goat or sheep that is feeding on some plant. It is not all the times true. Many times insects also feed on the plants, and that also can be considered under herbivory, that one species of animal, it is feeding on the other species for the purpose of, I will say, its food. That is considered as herbivory. We know many examples from the herbivory, but very few examples from carnivory. And there is a group of plants, they feed on, say, some animals for the purpose of, say, fulfillment of some kind of nutrition. And the examples of Venus flytrap, bladderwort, pitcher plant, they usually consume the animals and largely I will say the insects. Now when it comes to predation, whenever insects they are feeding on some plant, I don't know this concept was taken by me for the students who are attending this class. So this is a kind of predation. Now there are three different species of Ceropegias on the upper image I will say. One is Ceropegia ananthi, candelabrum and spiralis. And here we get one butterfly caterpillar. It is Danaus, plain tiger butterfly. This plain tiger butterfly, it lays its eggs only on the leaves of say Calotropis family, Calotrops, Asclepiadaceae family. So Asclepiadaceae, Apocynaceae, it is known to have milky latex. It is known to have milky latex. And none of the other animals, I will say, they usually feed on this latex bearing plants. So they feed on they lay their eggs especially on the leaves of these plants. Then these eggs they hatch out, and the larvae they feed on the leaves of this plant. Of course, whenever they are feeding on the leaves of this plant, foraging on the leaves of this plant, they are going to consume even the latex. And this latex then helps this caterpillar particularly to save itself, as I will say, mode of or I will say one kind of defense mechanism. So this latex is poisonous latex, and whenever it is going to consume, this larvae is going to consume, that latex is going to accumulate in the body. And this fact is known to this caterpillar as well as I will say to the birds. If at all the birds they feed on these larvae, they die out of the cardiac arrest immediately. So this fact is known to these birds also. And that's why they have created a very, I will say, bright coloration pattern. And this bright coloration pattern, which is produced by these animals as well as sometimes the plants, especially gunj, the seeds of the gunj, Abrus precatorius, they are also beautiful, equally beautiful. So this is a kind of, I will say, warning signals, honest warning. These are considered as honest warning signals. So in the snakes also, usually the poisonous snakes, they have some kind of hissing voice. Maybe you consider cobra, Russell's viper, saw-scaled viper. They have some kind of hissing voice, and they give a signal before the attack. They give some kind of signal before the attack. And same thing you can see even in these plain tiger butterfly. They are attractive in nature, but they are giving signal that you don't come to us, we are poisonous. And if at all you are going to eat these butterflies, you are going to die. So this is the signal to the birds, and it is given for the, I will say, to avoid the predation, especially to these caterpillars. Now caterpillar is feeding on the plant of Asclepiads and Apocynaceae members. So unless and until they eat plenty of these leaves, they even can't reach the adult phase, cocoon phase. So some of the hormones, even sex hormones, they are utilized by these caterpillars, and these hormones, they are plant-based hormones. So this fact is also known not only, I will say, in Apocynaceae and Asclepiadaceae eating caterpillars, but this is also known from the caterpillars who feeds on the lupine plant, Calotropis, Crotalaria plant. So it is in that also. Then we will come to carnivory. Of course, if you see the image, this is the image of Drosera indica, sundew plant. And if you see the leaves, they are covered with the tentacles, glandular tentacles. And in the image on the foreground as well as on the background, there are two butterflies that are captured by this plant. Now, as a primary, I will say photosynthesis, food production, photosynthesis is primary aim, primary role, I will say. It plays primary role in consumption, in production of food. But usually these plants, they grow on, I will say, aquatic conditions, water rich, I will say, the grounds, where the potable nitrogen is very less. Nitrites and nitrates are very less. Free nitrogen is available, but which cannot be consumed by these plants. And that's why these plants, they have adopted very different technique, that primary photosynthesis is always there in the plant because plant is green, but they fulfill their nitrogen deficiency by eating or by consuming these insects. So the insect body is known to have higher amount of protein. So this protein is breakdown, and it is consumed by these plants. So it is exactly, I will say, the vice versa table situation. So many times we eat the plants, but there are certain situations, there are certain instances where plants eat the animals. And examples, of course, we have seen. There are many. This is one plant, sundew plant. This is another. It is known as Indian pitcher plant, Nepenthes khasiana. In previous example, of course, whenever everything is eaten, everything is consumed, the leaf enrolls out, and it releases or it dumps out whatever debris is there. But here, there is no you don't get that mechanism of dumping. So once this pitcher is filled, it is of no use. The plant has developed another pitcher for the purpose of, say, fulfillment of this nutrition. So this is Indian pitcher plant, Nepenthes khasiana, known to occur only in Khasia, Jayantia and Garo hills of Assam. We don't get in southern part of India. Of course, now there are many species under cultivation, but wild condition, only one species, and that too in northeast India. But whenever we are talking about these, I will say, pitcher plants, they capture the, I will say, the animals, but there are some opportunists too. And this is an opportunistic frog, which is sitting on the rim of this pitcher plant. So whoever is going to attract toward this pitcher, especially the insect, this frog feeds on that particular insect. So in turn, the pitcher is not at all going to get anything out of, I will say, this interaction. So this is a kind of, say, opportunistic parasitic interaction. Not only that, it also lays its eggs inside this pitcher, and these eggs, they are not at all, I will say, getting any kind of harm through, I will say, these digestive fluids. The eggs, they hatch out, they become tadpoles, they metamorphose into juvenile. But once they become juvenile, they have to jump out of this pitcher. Otherwise, it will get digested by that pitcher. So it comes on the rim of this pitcher. It feeds on the insect, whoever is going to visit these pitcher plants. Then there is one more carnivorous mechanism, and it is Utricularia. So there are many species of Utricularias, especially Khas and Mahabaleshwar, Lonavala. They are known to have this beautiful species in Western Ghats, Utricularia purpurascens. This is a grassland species that usually occurs in Marathwada, Vidarbha region, Bifida. They have their different mechanism, and they have such kind of small bladders where they have door which usually opens on the inner side. Once it is open, the insect enters inside, but once insect enters inside, it closes down, and then insect is usually trapped, then it is digested. But it is the most interesting and, I will say, complicated trap in amongst all carnivorous plant. Then there is another mechanism that we were supposed to discuss, is nesting and roosting. Some plants usually come to the plant only for the purpose of, say, nesting, and some animals, they come to the plant only for the purpose of roosting. Now, at many places you must have seen, particularly Maina, usually we call it as Salunki in Marathi, then cranes, Bagale, Karkoche. See, these birds particularly, they don't stay at their nest. They have their one roosting site, particularly in the vicinity of, I will say, or on a very large trees, Ficus bengalensis trees particularly. So they come for the purpose of roosting in the night time, and again in the daytime they go back to their nest. So for variety of purposes they utilizes the plant. And here we are going to consider one defensive mutualism, where the plant is having mutualism with the ants. So of course this species we don't get in our region, it is from African region, and this is Acacia spirocephala, where it has hollow thorns. It has hollow thorns. So these hollow thorns provide a nesting to these ants, and in turn these ants they provide defense from foraging big mammals. But at the same time, plant has to provide some kind of food to these I will say ants. So it provides in two different ways. Usually these acacias, they are known to have some kind of gland along the rachis. So these glands, they are called as extrafloral nectaries. So they secrete some kind of nectar, and it is provided as food for these ants. At the same time, if you see the terminal portion of these leaflets, it has something modified structure in the leaflets, and that is usually eaten by these ants. So ants, they are getting shelter as well as food on the plant. In turn, they have to provide protection from foraging animals to these plants. So this is considered as defensive mutualism. Now there is another concept. It is little known, I will say, at graduation level, but at post-graduation level, everybody has studied it, and it is known as crying for help, or a burglar's alarm as VOC's alarm. VOCs is volatile organic chemicals. So whenever the plants, they are under attack by some kind of pest, when plants are under attack by some kind of pest, they start to secrete, they start to emit some kind of chemicals. And these chemicals, they are organic in nature, volatile in nature, and that's why they are considered as volatile organic chemicals. So once these chemicals, they are secreted, emitted by these plants as a stimulus from, say, herbivorous insects, they are attacking this plant. This stimulus, this secreted, I will say, chemicals, they are sensed by another strata of insects. And this another strata of insect is usually carnivorous insects. They feed on the insects that are attacking the plant. So whenever they are under attack, because this plant, they can't do at their own, these plants, they can't defend themselves against the attacks, and that's why they emit some kind of chemicals that attract the another group of insect. These attracted insects, they come to the plant, they find that there is plenty of food available in the form of larvae, and then they feed on these larvae. So this kind of concept can be considered as crying for help. So when you can't defend, you try to cry, and you try to attract some, I will say, another person for the purpose of your defense. So this kind of mechanism is also seen in these plants. Now there is co-evolution available, I will say, in plants as well as animals. And majority times, whatever studies they have carried out, they are related to pollination. And what exactly is then done here in this kind of, I will say, co-evolution? So both the species, they starts to create some kind of pressure on the other species. They starts to create some kind of the other pressure on the other species. For example, if we consider your own college, now college is, the authorities of college will expect from the teachers for the purpose, I will say, for the excellence. The authorities, college authorities, they will expect excellence from the teachers. And if at all teachers has to provide excellence at a par, then the teachers will expect that we will have higher amount of salaries than the others. So both the parties, they go on putting some kind of pressure on each other, and at the end I will say they evolve together, they create some kind of structures together, and then these structures they become very selective, and this can be considered as a co-evolution. Now there are two examples I have quoted in this image. One is yucca flower, yucca moth, and another is fig wasp relationship. So here if you see on the left hand side, this is yucca flower and this is yucca moth. Now here is the opening available on the downside. Only yucca moth can enter this opening. Rest of the insects they can't. And this is a trimerous flower, monocotyledons flower. So it is known to have tricarpellary ovary, and that's why out of these three carpels, in one of the carpel, this yucca moth, they lay their eggs. But if at all they lay their eggs even more than two, immediately the plant senses now the flower is of, or the ovaries are of no use for us. They are utilized by this yucca moth, and then it go for the abortion. And this fact is known to yucca moth as well as for the yucca plant. So they utilize usually all the time, I will say 99% cases, only one chamber out of three. So two chambers they are having fertilized the seeds fertilized by these yucca moths, and one chamber is having its own own caterpillars, eggs and caterpillars of yucca moth. So this is kind of a mutualistic, I will say, co-evolution developed by yucca moth as well as yucca flower. Now in figs also we have seen such kind of relationship. So usually the terminal portion of fig is known to have one hole, and that is known as ostiole. So this allows, the opening allows to enter only specific species of wasp that enters inside, that lays their eggs in these ovaries, and one of the few of the ovaries they are then modified into gallflowers. So this kind of mechanism is known, evolution is known in these two examples. Then third example is again Poianian mimicry. What exactly is the mimicry? What exactly is the mimic, model, dupe? That I'm not going to discuss here. But here, if you see on the right hand side, these are the two orchid flowers. Of course, we don't get the upper one, but we get the lower species of orchid. This is Cotonia peduncularis, and it is very common in Western Ghats. Not Western Ghats, Konkan region of Western Ghats. So if you see the orchid, of course, again it is from monocotyledon. It is having 6 petals, trimerous symmetry, monocot being monocotyledon. 3 outermost petals, they are very normal. And out of the 3 innermost, 2 are also normal, but one of the petal that is modified as a female wasp. Not only visual, but even chemical cue created by this particular petal is very similar to the female of this particular wasp. And that's why this fellow gets attracted toward this. And once it struggles for the copulation, pseudocopulation, the pollinia present at the terminal end, they get attached to the head or the tail, and then this fellow visits another flower. So if at all this wasp is cheated many times, probably he doesn't remember. So it can be considered as one of the form of Gajni. So it is there. So this is mimicry. And then I was talking about this, that is a sequence of extinctions, chain of extinctions. So here is a dodo seed, tumblecock tree or dodo tree. It is a member of Sapotaceae chiku family. The seed is very hard. Even if at all you eat chiku, sapota, it is not at all, I will say, even cannot be breakable by us. It cannot be break by us even by eating. So usually we throw away. So this bird was there at Mauritius. It was a flightless bird like that of duck. And this fellow was eating on or feeding on these tumblecock trees. So in 17th century, this bird became extinct because of I will say, high degree of poaching, and it was poached only because of its flightlessness nature. It was not at all able to fly. It was land bird, and it was eaten by, I will say, the soldiers particularly entered on Mauritius in 17th century because it was easy to catch, easy to eat, and so much of flesh they are going to get out of it. So it was eaten. It became extinct in 17th century, and then at the end of 18th century, they found that the dodo tree, which was named after this bird, is the population of dodo tree is going down. Then forcefully they fed that some of the seeds to the ducks, geese, and then they found that some of the seeds, they are getting germinated, and now it is survived. So the Sidroxylon as well as dodo both were endemic to uh, Mauritius, but now dodo is no more available. But still, uh, dodo tree or tumblecock tree is struggling for its survival. Then the last part we are going to see is crazy courtship. Now animals utilize the plants with a different, I will say, the concepts, different ways. Of course, we also built houses. Now we are constructing in I will say, the cement concrete. But prior to that, it was available only in the plants. But same way, some of the birds, they utilize the plants for the purpose of constructing their nests, and even sometimes the entrance of these nests, they are decorated by these birds. Now here on this left hand side, this is bowerbird. There are many species of it. So they used to collect different colors, I will say, to attract, to decorate the entrance of their nest. So whoever has created most decorative, I will say, the entrance of nest, that bird is going to attract the most, I will say, what we'll say, the beautiful female towards this nest, and then they establish the nest. Now there are certain ants even in our region. They usually try to collect the fallen petals of the flowers, and they are gathered around these, I will say, nests. Not only that, not only they collect the petals, sometimes the remainings of whatever they have eaten, even the animal parts, body parts, insect body parts that they have eaten, they are decorated around the entrance. So it is a kind of visual cue given to the members of the same colony. Visual cue given to the members of same colony, they utilize. So it is not necessary that only human beings they give some rose flower and attract the other side, other, I will say, partner, either male or the female. But it is also the animals, they utilize the plants for the purpose of, say, courtship. And that is what we have discussed. Even in Baya, this is Indian weaver bird, and this is the male and this is the female. So male starts to view 3 to 4 different nests at the same time. Then the female Baya comes there, weaver bird comes there. She selects one of the nests, then the rest of the nests they are abandoned, and only the selected nest is completed, and then they lay their eggs, they complete their family like this. So with this, I would like to thank again the authorities of Wagire College, Patankar Madam, Muslim Madam, and Jagtap sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. So this session is open for question and answer. If somebody has any question, they can ask.
Abhijit.
I think
Nikhil,
Yes, sir.
any
Uh, I
question?
have I have one question, sir.
Hmm.
Please, can you give some suggestion to our student regarding the post-graduation studies or project studies in plant animal interaction?
Yes, you can give many because there is one plant which is in your vicinity, Dreamia razi, that occurs only in your region. That too restricted, now restricted only for say 2 or 3 square kilometers worldwide. Hmm. That much restricted population it. So whatever we have seen in yucca pollination, the same kind of moth, of course, different species, but same kind of moth you get on this plant. And now this is the correct season to visit that place. It is exactly the top end of Diveghat, isn't it? I think you must have seen that plant at Diveghat
Yes, yes, near Jhendewadi. That
near Jhandewadi. Yes,
yes.
correct. So with the help of the students, you can go for such kind of say some kind of conservation practices associated with this species, because nobody know what exactly is the pollinator for that moth. Of course, whenever the seeds, fruits they mature, some of the fruits they are infested by some kind of caterpillars. So once I have tried to, I will say, isolate, catch the moth of it for identification purpose, and the same kind of story you can build that we have built around yucca moth, that you can build around this Dreamia raji plant.
Okay, sir. Okay. Thank you, sir.
So I feel this is a very wonderful lecture, sir, by you and very informative. So it's really not like if you are from plant biology, you cannot think about any other branch of botany. I feel it is interconnected. You can even study the way sir has mentioned interactions between plants and insects, more animals, and you can see how this interaction is useful for many aspects or many facets of the life science, or how and their survival strategies. So my side, I will say it's a wonderful lecture, sir, very informative, and student must get motivated with this, how they have to look forward in their education PGs, and how they can study with a small little projects that you have mentioned over here. Anybody wants to share something? So, sir, I have received many comments in the chat box. Sorry. And they are all saying that this lecture was really nice with a very nice photographs. So, if nobody has any question, shall we move further?
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, sir.
मामा काय क्वेश्चन रे?
हाँ सर.
काय क्वेश्चन वगैरे नाहीत का
नाही सर.
मामा? यस पाटील सर.
हा नमस्ते.
नमस्ते.
मला प्रश्न काहीच नाही, पण अनेक प्रश्नांची उत्तर आपल्या लेक्चर मधून तुम्ही विद्यार्थ्यांना दिलेली आहेत. विद्यार्थ्यांना फक्त एकच आव्हान आहे की सरांनी गेली जवळपास 30 वर्ष अव्याहतपणे निसर्गात भ्रमण करून ही सगळी माहिती गोळा केलेली आहे. आपण किमान वर्षातील 30 दिवस म्हणजे 1 महिना भ्रमंती केली तर खूप आपल्याला माहिती मिळेल, एवढंच मला विद्यार्थ्यांना सांगायचं आहे. आणि खूप छान लेक्चर, खूप छान आपण माहिती दिलेली आहे. आणि अनेक विद्यार्थ्यांसाठी हे एक इनिशिएटिंग मटेरियल म्हणून आपण एक मूलभूत जी संकल्पना आहे निसर्गातली, हे खूप चांगल्या पद्धतीने मांडलेले. छोट्या छोट्या अगदी गोष्टी असतात, म्हणजे उंबरामध्ये असलेला, फायकस मध्ये असलेला ब्लास्टोफॅगा इन्सेक्ट हा विशिष्ट प्रकारचा, आपण 900 फायकसच्या इन्सेक्टच्या स्पेसिस त्या पॉलिनेट करत असतात. पण आपलं साधं एक उंबर घेतलं तरी सुद्धा त्याच्यामध्ये आपल्याला खूप छान पैकी ते मेकॅनिझम पाहायला मिळतं. छान झालं सर, एकदम मिळेल सर.
थँक्यू सर. ओके, थँक्यू मॅडम.
Okay, sir. Thank you very much. So I will call Dr. Sheetal Kalapure ma'am to give a vote of thanks.
Madam, unmute yourself.
Okay, sorry. Afternoon.
Again, unmute yourself.
Okay. Extremely very sorry. It gives me an immense pleasure to deliver vote of thanks for this event to all dignitaries assembled here for National Webinar Series on recent trends in plant sciences organized by Wagire College, Saswad. First of all, I would like to thank Dr. Mirin Sardesai sir from SPPU Botany Department, Pune for his inspirational talk on plant-animal interaction. Thank you, sir. Then thank you our well-wishers and my guides, Dr. H.S. Patil sir and Dr. Hase madam, as well Dr. Abhijit Limaye for joining National Webinar Series by accepting our invitation. Thanks to Principal Dr. Sushma Bhosle ma'am for her constant support for National Webinar Series. Thank you, DBT Coordinator Dr. Vidya Patankar and Head of Botany Department, Dr. Swapnil Jagtap sir, as well as Professor Nikhil Guru for taking efforts for arranging such a nice and wonderful lecture. Heartful thanks to all staff members of Wagire College, Saswat, as well as other faculty members from various institutes. Thanks to non-teaching staff from Wagire College. Last but not least, I would like to appreciate my beloved students for joining and making resounding success. Finally, I leave you this inspiring quote by Martin King. An individual has not started living until he rises above the confines of his individual concerns to the broader concerns of all his humanity. Once again, I, Dr. Sheetal Kalapure, thanks to you all for your kind cooperation and attention for our national webinar series. Thank you so much.